Disclaimer: it's inspired by reality, shaped by imagination.
What happens when a rock legend known for his proud British heart goes toe-to-toe with one of the UK's most outspoken talk show hosts over the question of patriotism? On Loose Women, Rod Stewart sat across from Denise Welch to debate a question that's dividing not just Britain, but America too. Has patriotism become unpopular among younger generations? The show started light, with laughter about Rod's glittering career and Denise's usual quick wit. But when the topic turned to loyalty, pride, and the meaning of waving a flag, the atmosphere shifted. Rod's voice grew firmer, his expression more serious. He said what many older viewers at home were already thinking, that people today treat national pride as something to be ashamed of. Denise, fiery and unapologetic, pushed back hard, accusing him of clinging to nostalgia and misunderstanding what modern youth care about. The tension built until the smiles faded and the audience went silent. What began as a chat about values quickly became a generational clash, one about belonging, cultural guilt, and how identity has changed in an age of global activism and skepticism toward tradition. By the time the cameras stopped rolling, both had made headlines, but only one would leave the stage with the audience's applause ringing behind them.
The audience clapped as Loose Women returned from the commercial break. The panel of hosts, Denise Welch, Colleen Nolan, Jane Moore, and Kay Adams, welcomed their special guest with open arms. Rod Stewart, dressed sharply in a dark suit and trademark leopard print tie, flashed that familiar grin and waved to the cheering crowd. "Rod Stewart, everyone," Denise said, leaning forward with her trademark energy. "The man, the legend, the voice we all grew up with." Rod laughed, bowing his head slightly. "You're making me blush, Denise. I'm just a singer with good hair and a bad golf swing." The audience laughed, but Kay smoothly shifted gears. "Rod, we're thrilled to have you. Today's topic, patriotism. Some say it's gone out of style, especially with younger people. You've always worn your pride for Britain on your sleeve. How do you see it?" Rod leaned forward. "I think it's a shame, honestly. When I was growing up, loving your country wasn't controversial. We sang our anthems, we waved the flag, we stood for something. Now it feels like you get labeled old-fashioned or worse if you say you're proud to be British or American." Denise folded her arms, smiling tightly. "I don't think it's about shame, Rod. I think young people just see patriotism differently. For them it's about justice, equality, and accountability. They're not rejecting pride, they're redefining it." Rod nodded politely, but his tone sharpened. "Redefining it's fine, but let's be honest. There's a growing crowd that sees national pride as toxic. They equate the flag with oppression or history's mistakes. That's not fair to the millions of good people who simply love where they come from." The room grew still. Colleen shifted in her seat, sensing the tension rising. "But Rod, don't you think it's fair to say that younger generations are more global-minded? They care about people everywhere, not just their own borders." Rod chuckled, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. "I get that, but you can care about the world and love your country. Those two things aren't enemies." Denise jumped in again. "But Rod, when you say love your country, what does that mean now? For many young people, the symbols of patriotism, the flag, the anthem, the institutions, don't reflect them. They see hypocrisy, politicians talking about pride while failing ordinary people." Rod leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "Then change the politicians, not the flag." A ripple of applause rolled through the audience. Denise pressed on. "But sometimes those symbols represent pain, Rod. Colonialism, inequality, things we can't just ignore." Rod met her gaze steadily. "No one's saying ignore them, Denise. I'm saying you don't throw away love because of imperfection. You fix it from within. That's what real patriotism is, loving something enough to make it better." The crowd applauded again, louder this time. Denise smiled, but there was a flicker of frustration in her eyes. "So you're saying if someone criticizes their country, they're unpatriotic?" Rod shook his head. "Not at all. Criticism's part of love. But mockery, cynicism, the idea that being pride is ignorant, that's where we've gone wrong. We've turned pride into a punchline." Jane Moore, quiet until now, added softly, "Rod, maybe people are just scared to express patriotism now because they don't want to be associated with extremist groups or hate groups that hijack it." Rod pointed slightly, agreeing. "Exactly, and that's the tragedy. We've let a few bad apples steal something beautiful.
The flag doesn't belong to politicians or extremists. It belongs to the people." The studio was silent for a moment. Even Denise seemed to pause, measuring her next words carefully. "So, what would you say to a young person who says patriotism doesn't speak to me anymore?" Rod smiled faintly. "I'd tell them, don't let the loudest voices define love for your country. Pride isn't about being blind, it's about being grateful. You can fight for change and still love your roots." The crowd applauded again, stronger, more sustained. Denise leaned back, arms crossed, a small smirk forming. "You always know how to charm a crowd, Rod, but don't think I'm letting you off that easy." Rod laughed, that familiar raspy chuckle filling the room. "Wouldn't expect you to, love." The camera zoomed in on both of them, two icons from different worlds, caught in a respectful yet fiery exchange. The tension was only beginning to build, and everyone watching could sense it. The real clash was still to come.
The moment the applause faded, Denise leaned forward again, her expression sharp but polite. "Rod, I think what you're missing is that younger people aren't less patriotic. They're just more skeptical. They've grown up watching corruption, inequality, and endless wars. Can you blame them for not waving the flag as enthusiastically as their grandparents?" Rod adjusted his cufflinks, his calm composure returning. "I understand skepticism, Denise, but if the only time we talk about our country is to criticize it, we lose something vital. Pride used to bring people together. Now it seems to divide them." Denise nodded slowly, clearly ready for battle. "But that's the thing, Rod. Sometimes pride blinds people. You can't just celebrate the good and ignore the damage done in the name of that same flag. Young people are saying, we love our country, but we demand it be better. That's not unpatriotic. That's progress." Rod's eyes narrowed slightly, his tone still measured but firmer. "Progress is fine, Denise, but not if it means tearing down everything that came before it. You don't burn your house down because you don't like the wallpaper." The audience laughed and clapped, sensing the humor but also the tension beneath it. Denise smiled tightly. "Maybe not, but if the foundation's cracked, sometimes you have to rebuild. That's what this generation is trying to do, build something fairer." Rod gestured toward her. "Fairness is noble, but when did love of country become something people have to justify? When I see someone sneer at the flag or call patriotism outdated, I don't see progress, I see cynicism. We're raising kids who think loyalty is weakness." Colleen jumped in, trying to mediate. "But Rod, it's not that simple. Patriotism today can feel political. If someone waves a flag, it's automatically assumed they're taking a side." Rod nodded. "Exactly, and that's the problem. The flag shouldn't belong to one party or ideology. It's everyone's. It's meant to unite us, not label us." Denise crossed her legs, tone sharpening. "But Rod, don't you think sometimes that unity you talk about has meant silence for a lot of people? Minorities, women, the poor, they've been told to keep quiet for the sake of patriotism. Maybe questioning that isn't a lack of pride, it's courage." The room went quiet. Rod studied her carefully before replying. "I agree with courage, Denise. But I think courage also means defending what's good about your country when everyone else is tearing it down. We can't rewrite our history every time the wind changes." Denise smirked. "Or maybe it means finally writing the parts that were left out." That line drew murmurs from the crowd, some clapping, others shifting uncomfortably. The air thickened with that rare electricity daytime TV rarely sees. Rod leaned back, chuckling under his breath. "You're clever, Denise, but if we spend all our time apologizing for the past, we'll forget to build a future." Denise fired back immediately. "And if we refuse to look at the past, we'll just repeat it. That's not patriotism, Rod. That's denial dressed up as nostalgia." Jane Moore, sensing the rising temperature, interjected softly. "Maybe the real issue is that everyone defines patriotism differently now. For some, it's about heritage and pride. For others, it's justice and equality. Maybe it doesn't have to be one or the other." But Denise wasn't finished. She turned toward Rod, her voice calm but pointed. "Rod, you've had incredible success, fame, and opportunity, things your country gave you. But can you see how someone who's struggled, who's felt left behind, might not feel that same pride?" Rod nodded slowly. "Of course. But that's exactly why patriotism matters. Because love of country isn't reserved for the privileged, it's the belief that your homeland can be better for everyone. That's what drives change, not resentment. The audience clapped again, and even Kay Adams was surprised by how personal the debate had become. Rod looked around, his tone softening slightly. I just want young people to know it's okay to be proud. It's okay to love where you come from. That doesn't make you blind, it makes you human. Denise's voice softened too, but her conviction didn't waver. And I want them to know it's okay to ask their country to do better. That doesn't make them ungrateful. It makes them brave. For a moment, neither spoke. The audience, caught between cheers and reflection, stayed quiet. Two generations, two visions of love for one's homeland, collided not in anger, but in deep belief. Then Rod broke the silence with a half-smile. Guess we'll agree on one thing, Denise. People cared deeply. And maybe that's the best sign that patriotism isn't dead after all. The audience burst into applause, some for Rod, some for Denise, but the tension lingered. Neither of them looked ready to back down. The warmth of earlier had cooled into something sharper, more honest. The clash was far from over.
The air in the studio seemed heavier now. The smiles had faded. What began as polite disagreement was turning into something more personal, more revealing. Rod Stewart sat back, looking thoughtful, but clearly stung by Denise's last remark. "You know, Denise," he began slowly, his voice softer, "I didn't grow up with privilege. My family was working class. My dad worked hard, my mom stretched every penny. I saw tough times before the fame, but we always had pride. Even when money was tight, we'd hang the flag on our window on special days. It wasn't politics, it was gratitude." A hush fell over the room. Denise listened closely, her posture easing slightly. Rod continued, his voice steady but emotional. "That pride kept us going. It reminded us that we were part of something bigger than our struggles, that even when life was rough, we had hope. I worry that we've lost that spirit, that everything now has to be analyzed, criticized, and broken apart until there's nothing left to hold on to." A few people in the audience clapped, gently. Denise leaned forward, her tone quieter but still firm. "I hear that, Rod. Really, I do. But for a lot of people, especially younger ones or minorities, that same flag doesn't always represent hope. It represents promises that were never kept. You talk about pride, but pride feels different when the country you're proud of hasn't always been proud of you." The crowd murmured, some nodding, others uneasy. Rod tilted his head, taking her words in. "That's fair, but don't you think the answer is to claim it anyway? To make it yours? To say, this country failed me once, but I'm still part of it, and I'm going to make it better?" Denise smiled faintly. "You say that like it's easy, but not everyone feels safe waving the same flag that's been used to silence them." There was a pause, an uncomfortable, heavy silence that hung in the air like fog. Rod's expression softened again. "You know, Denise, I think I maybe get that more than you'd expect. I've been bored in my own hometown, called a sellout, told I forgot where I came from. It hurts when people think you're betrayed what you love. But I never stopped caring. I never stopped being proud. Sometimes love for something means refusing to give up on it, even when it disappoints you." A woman in the audience clapped slowly, others joining in. The tension began to shift from confrontation to connection. Denise's voice grew quieter. "You know, Rod, I actually envy that. That sense of belonging, of confidence in something bigger than yourself. I think a lot of people just don't feel that anymore. They're angry because they feel shut out of the story." Rod looked down, nodding. "Maybe that's why I get defensive, because I grew up believing patriotism was a bridge. But maybe it's turned into a wall for some." Denise met his eyes. "Exactly. And if we can admit that, then maybe we can rebuild it. Not the old kind of patriotism that demands blind loyalty, but one that includes everyone. One that says we all belong here, even if our experiences are different." The studio fell silent again. It was the kind of silence that felt reflective, not awkward. Jane Moore leaned forward gently. "That's quite something, both of you. It's rare to see people actually listen on daytime TV." Rod chuckled softly. "Maybe we're just getting old enough to know shouting doesn't help." Denise laughed too, the tension breaking for a moment. "Speak for yourself." But the brief laugh faded quickly. Rod's voice turned serious again. "Denise," he said, "I can respect your point, but I'll never agree that questioning everything is the same as caring. At some point, you gotta stand for something, or you'll fall for anything." The applause came, half supportive, half uncertain. And just like that, the fire that had cooled was ready to spark again. The storm wasn't over. It was about to break.
The tension in the studio was palpable. The audience, previously absorbed in thoughtful reflection, now leaned forward, sensing the calm from the flashpoint was about to shatter. Denise Welch, never one to hold back, leaned across the table, her eyes flashing. "Rod, I respect your experience, I really do, but you can't just tell an entire generation that if they don't wave a flag or sing an anthem, they don't care. That's unfair and frankly, it's insulting." Rod's jaw tightened. The warmth from moments ago was gone. His voice, though still measured, carried the weight of decades. "I'm not insulting anyone, Denise. I'm warning them. If you don't believe in something, if you don't have pride in where you come from, you risk losing more than just symbols. You risk losing the very idea that you matter. That's not rhetoric, it's reality." Denise's lips pressed into a thin line. "And what about people who have been marginalized, who have been told for years that their loyalty doesn't count? You think yelling, 'Be proud,' solves centuries of systemic injustice?" Rod leaned in, his piercing eyes locking on hers. "No, it doesn't. But it starts with acknowledgement, with holding on to the pieces that still matter. You can't build a future if you burn everything down because some things are uncomfortable." The audience stirred, whispers running through the room. Some clapped, some sat forward tensely, all captivated by the showdown. Denise's voice sharpened, biting now. "Maybe to you, Rod, it's uncomfortable to be challenged, but to many young people, you're speaking past them, pretending that nostalgia is universal." Rod slammed a hand lightly on the table, not in anger, but for emphasis. The studio gasped. "I'm not pretending anything. I'm saying love for your country can be universal. It's a bridge, not a leash. But if we keep telling kids their pride is wrong, it dies before it can grow." The air crackled with energy. Jane Moore glanced nervously toward the producers, who nodded at each other knowing this was live TV at its most electric. Denise leaned back, her eyes narrowing. "Well, Rod, I guess that's where we'll have to leave it. Some of us see patriotism as a shield, some as a sword, and apparently we'll never agree on which is stronger." Rod straightened, exhaling slowly. "Maybe not, but I'll stand by what I believe in, no matter what anyone says." The camera zoomed in on his face, a mixture of passion, defiance, and conviction. The studio lights reflected off the polished table, casting sharp shadows over Denise's thoughtful, stubborn expression. For a brief moment, it seemed like the debate would never end. The energy in the room was so thick you could almost touch it, a perfect storm of history, pride, and generational tension. Then, just as the segment drew to its close, the audience erupted in a mix of cheers and applause, realizing they had witnessed a rare moment, a clash that was more than entertainment. It was raw, honest, and unflinchingly human. The stage lights dimmed slightly, signaling a break, but the echoes of the confrontation lingered. The debate had reached its peak, and the viewers at home were left with one undeniable truth. Neither side had backed down, and both had left everything on the table.
The cameras returned after the break, and the studio felt noticeably different. The tension that had crackled moments ago had softened, leaving a charged, reflective energy in its place. The audience, still buzzing, watched as Rod Stewart and Denise Welch took a deep breath, ready to bring the discussion to a close. Whoopi Goldberg, filling in with a gentle smile, spoke first. "Well, that was something, wasn't it? Sometimes these conversations get heated, But today, we saw both sides laying their hearts on the table. Rod nodded, voice calm but thoughtful. I may have raised my voice a little earlier, but that's because I care. I care about this country, and I care about passing something meaningful to the next generation. I've seen what pride can do. It can lift you when everything else seems to fail. That's what I wanted to convey today. Denise softened her tone, leaning in slightly. And I've heard you, Rod. I may see things differently, but I understand where you're coming from. Patriotism isn't a single definition. For some, it's tradition. For others, it's demanding fairness. Both can coexist. The audience erupted into applause, some standing, many clapping with nods of approval. There was a sense of catharsis. Viewers had witnessed not just a clash of opinions, but a meeting of minds and hearts. Colleen Nolan added, "It's rare to see people really listen to each other on live TV. YouTube brought honesty, passion, and respect into a conversation that could have just been shouting points at each other. Instead, it became something bigger, a reminder that debate doesn't have to divide us, it can connect us." Rod smiled faintly, looking out over the audience. "I think what's important is that people keep caring, keep questioning, but also remember to love. Love your home, love the people around you, and don't let cynicism take over. Pride, when paired with reflection, can be a force for good." Denise nodded, and I think the lesson here is that it's okay to challenge, to question, and to demand better, without rejecting everything that came before. We can honor tradition while shaping a more inclusive future. Whoopi leaned back, her tone reflective. Maybe that's the takeaway for everyone watching. Patriotism, love for one's country, and hope for its future aren't mutually exclusive. It's messy, it's complicated, and sometimes it's uncomfortable, but it's also necessary. Rod turned slightly to Denise, offering a handshake. "I respect your perspective, Denise. Today wasn't about winning, it was about conversation." Denise shook his hand firmly, a small smile breaking through. "Exactly, Rod. Conversation, and maybe understanding a bit more about each other in the process." The audience clapped, some rising to their feet, moved not by the drama, but by the human honesty on display. Colleen Nolan added quietly, "It's rare to see people really listen to each other on live TV." Rod looked at the audience, then back at Denise. "I hope people watching at home see that disagreement doesn't have to mean division. We can care about the same things differently, and that's okay. It's what makes democracy alive." Denise nodded. And maybe it reminds everyone that patriotism isn't about blind devotion or criticism. It's about engagement, about asking hard questions and still loving where you come from. The applause swelled again. Cameras panned over the studio, capturing the smiles, the nods, and the reflective expressions of both the hosts and audience members. There was a sense of completion, even if some debates would continue in living rooms, online forums, and classrooms around the country. As the credits began to roll, Rod leaned slightly towards Denise and whispered something that made her laugh softly. The cameras caught only their smiles, but the moment conveyed everything: respect, understanding, and the rare kind of connection forged through honest dialogue. Outside the studio, viewers were already sharing clips on social media. Hashtags trended, praising both Rod and Denise for the passionate but respectful debate. Comments poured in. Finally, a debate that actually teaches something. And I didn't agree with either completely, but I feel I understand both sides now. And just as the show ended, a camera caught Rod taking a moment to gesture toward a young fan in the front row, silently reminding everyone that sometimes patriotism is about the small, personal connections that keep hope alive. If you enjoyed this powerful discussion, subscribe for more celebrity confrontations, emotional debates, and unforgettable moments from live television. Drop a comment below. Do you think patriotism should be about tradition, accountability, or both?